Welcome back, drifters. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of the ancient world, where myths whisper and the gods themselves tremble. Beneath the surface of mortal memory lies a river, darker than night, feared by Olympus and binding even the divine. This is the River Styx. More than water, it is oath and punishment, boundary and curse. A stream so potent that no god dares lie upon its name. As sleep calls you deeper, allow this tale to carry you like a silent ferry over forbidden waters. And if the journey leaves you wondering what secrets still lie beneath, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drift with us again, where myth and dreams become one. Styx, the goddess of the River Styx, was not only the eldest of the Oceanites, the daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, but also the personification of hatred, stygos. Her very name is connected with the verb stugio, which means to hate or abhor, making her an embodiment of dark emotions. The River Styx, which flows around the underworld, was both a literal and metaphorical boundary between life and death. The river itself had a crucial role in Greek mythology, as it surrounded the realm of Hades, creating a barrier that souls had to cross to reach the afterlife. This river, flowing 7 times around the underworld, was a place where the dead were ferried by Charon, the boatman. But it also carried a more profound significance beyond mere geography. It was a powerful symbol of oaths and divine justice, with the gods themselves swearing their most solemn oaths by it. The mythological importance of Styx began long before the river itself became a symbol of sacred vows. Styx was the first of the immortals to align with Zeus in the epic conflict against the Titans. At a time when the Olympian gods were struggling to overcome their powerful forebears, Styx's loyalty proved invaluable. She was not alone in her support. She brought with her a remarkable set of children: Nike, victory; Zelos, rivalry; Bia, force; and Kratos, strength, each of whom played a crucial role in the war. These divine children became instrumental in Zeus's victory over the Titans, demonstrating Styx's commitment and the value she placed on supporting the god who would later become the king of the heavens. In recognition of her alliance and the support of her children, Zeus granted Styx a position of great honor. He made her the goddess by whom oaths were sworn, a role that placed her at the heart of divine law and justice. The River Styx, which flowed forth from the underworld, was also seen as a corrosive force in itself. Its waters were said to be so powerful that even the gods feared them. In some stories, the waters of Styx were said to have the ability to grant invulnerability when they were used to bathe, most famously in the case of Achilles. The connection between Styx and invulnerability is a notable one, as it suggests not only the literal power of the river's waters, but also a more symbolic connection to the divine and the irreversible nature of oaths and promises made by the gods. The river was so sacred that it became the focal point for the gods' most binding promises. When any god swore an oath by Styx, they were committing to a pact of the highest importance, one that could not be broken without severe consequences. The river's role as the agent of oaths was pivotal in the mythology of the gods. According to myth, whenever a god took an oath by Styx, Iris, the messenger of the gods, would go to the river to collect a cup of its water. This water would then be poured out by the god while making their solemn vow, signifying the gravity of the promise being made. This act was an expression of ultimate commitment, and it was a ritual that carried profound consequences for any god who might break it. Those who violated their oaths made in Styx's name were said to face terrible repercussions, often including a year-long exile from Olympus, a punishment which was deeply feared by the immortals. Styx's connection to the chthonic goddesses, deities of the underworld, further strengthened her association with death and fate. She was sometimes identified with figures like Demeter, Erinis, the Furies, and Nyx, all of whom represented darker, more destructive aspects of existence. As a personification of hatred, Styx embodied the negative, destructive forces that could shape the fate of both gods and mortals. Her influence was felt deeply in the underworld, where her river marked the boundary between life and death, and where her role in the divine order was linked to the maintenance of cosmic balance. In addition to her importance in the Titanomachy, Styx was also significant in the mythological tale surrounding the creation of the underworld. She had a deep connection with the primordial forces that shaped the world, and her waters, flowing from the edges of the earth, symbolized the separation between the mortal realm and the world of the dead. Styx was often depicted as a powerful, implacable force, one that could not be easily crossed or bypassed. The gods' respect for her waters and her oaths underscored her importance in maintaining order in the divine and mortal worlds. Despite her often somber role, Styx's legacy was not entirely bleak. As the mother of such powerful figures as Nike, Zelos, Bia, and Kratos, she played a crucial role in shaping the virtues that were important in both the divine and mortal realms. Victory, rivalry, strength, and force were all attributes that defined the battles and conflicts that formed much of Greek mythology, and these qualities were often portrayed as necessary for achieving success and overcoming adversity. Styx's children, each embodying one of these traits, became fundamental to the workings of the world, both in terms of the Olympian gods' struggles against their enemies and the everyday struggles of mortals. The River Styx, then, was more than just a geographical feature. It was a symbol of the deep and binding forces that govern not only the physical realm, but the very fate of the gods themselves. Styx was a goddess whose power lay in her role as a mediator between the gods and the forces of the underworld, ensuring that their oaths and promises were upheld. She was a guardian of truth and justice, a reminder that even the gods were bound by laws they could not escape. Through Styx, the ancient Greeks understood the importance of keeping promises and respecting the forces beyond their control. Forces that could never be ignored without dire consequences. Thus, Styx's legacy endured as a reminder of the power of oaths, the inevitability of fate, and the unyielding nature of the laws that govern the divine world. The Titanes, ancient and powerful deities that ruled the cosmos before the rise of the Olympians, gave birth to a generation of divine beings that would one day shape the balance of heaven and earth. Among them, Oceanus and Tethys, the personifications of the world's waters, produced a lineage of daughters known as the Oceanides. These daughters were not just mere nymphs dwelling in rivers and springs, but personified aspects of the natural and moral order. Among the most notable of their children were Asia, Electra, Doris, Eurynome, Amphitrite, Meti, and especially Styx, who rose to a place of immense power and sacred duty. Styx, whose name came to be synonymous with hatred and dread, held a role of unique importance not only as a deity of the underworld, but also as a symbol of divine allegiance and loyalty. Though born among gentle and flowing spirits, Styx carried a darker, more powerful essence. She would eventually become the embodiment of the river that bordered the underworld, encircling Hades in its dark waters, and the unbreakable oath by which even the gods themselves would be bound. While other Oceanides remained tied to the pleasant, free-flowing rivers of the mortal world, Styx became linked to the deeper, more solemn domains of divine authority. She was regarded as one of the earliest born after the likes of Neda and Philia, and her name echoed across generations of myth as the spirit that stood at the gateway between life and death, law and chaos. According to Hesiod and many others, she was the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, but her destiny was unlike that of her sisters. In some versions, she became the consort of Pallas, a lesser-known titan often associated with warfare or wisdom, and from this union were born four of the most formidable personifications known to Greek myth: Nike, the goddess of victory; Zelos, the spirit of rivalry and zeal; Kratos, the embodiment of strength; and Bia, the personification of force. These children, like Styx herself, were no ordinary beings. They became the agents of Zeus himself, ever present beside the king of the gods, and their loyalty marked the turning point of a cosmic war that would shake the foundations of the heavens. When Zeus rose to challenge the old regime of Cronus and the other titans, he summoned all immortal beings to join his side in the battle for the throne of Olympus. He offered a promise to the divine host. Any deity who allied with him would retain their privileges and status, and those without honor under Cronus would be elevated to a rightful place of power. It was Styx, alone among her kind, who answered this call before all others, bringing her children to stand with Zeus in defiance of the old order. Her father, Oceanus, wise and ancient, had urged her to make this decisive move. In doing so, Styx not only sealed her loyalty, but carved a permanent place for herself and her lineage in the Olympian domain. Her children, victory, strength, rivalry, and force, became permanent residents of Zeus's house, never straying from his side, never acting without his command. They were his enforcers, his shields, and his weapons, representing the traits he would rely on to maintain control of the divine and mortal worlds. Zeus, recognizing the magnitude of Styx's loyalty, bestowed upon her a singular honor that no other deity shared. He made her river the embodiment of the most solemn oath among gods. From that moment onward, all divine promises would be sworn upon Styx's waters. When a god needed to prove the truth of their words, it was the waters of Styx they poured while making their vow. The consequence of breaking such an oath was dire. The offending god would be rendered unconscious and voiceless for years, cut off from the feasts and councils of Olympus. Thus, Styx's river became not only a boundary of the underworld, but also the very foundation of divine trust and accountability. Her name carried the weight of justice itself, and her essence, bitter, ancient, and incorruptible, guarded the order of heaven. Though later poets and mythographers would offer variations of her origin and consort, sometimes naming Paris as the father of Echidna through her, or linking her to Nyx and Erebus in genealogies that associated her with other dark and primordial entities, the essence of Styx remained unchanged. She was always a figure tied to the deepest and most solemn truths of the cosmos. In Roman myth, she was included among the children of night and darkness, alongside death, sleep, discord, and fate, placing her among the forces that governed the most inescapable and unchangeable parts of existence. Even in this darker genealogy, she remained the embodiment of hatred and the protector of divine justice. Her children, too, stood as eternal representations of the qualities required to win and hold divine power. Nike, swift and light-footed, crowned the victors of both gods and men. Kratos enforced the rule of Olympus with his unbending will. Bia, the silent force, moved through battlefields like a storm. Zelos pushed every competitor to their limits, ensuring no one settled into complacency. And all of them, born of Styx, remained steadfast in their allegiance to Zeus, never straying, never faltering. In this way, Styx was more than a river or a spirit. She was a keystone in the mythology of divine rule. Her story marked the beginning of the end for the Titans and the birth of a new cosmic order ruled by law, strength, and unbreakable vows. The presence of her name in oaths, the reverence of her children by Olympian gods, and the deep respect given to her waters by those who ruled the skies and the earth testify to a power that was quiet but immovable. She stood not in the brightness of Olympus, but in the shadowed spaces that held everything together, the silent witness of truth, loyalty, and divine retribution. Sworn by the waters of Styx that flowed from a dark rock in the depths of the underworld, the most solemn oaths of the gods were bound not merely by words, but by the terrible sanctity of that river itself, an honor granted to Styx in recognition of the loyalty she and her 4 formidable children had shown to Zeus during the great war against the Titans. When Zeus rose to challenge the reign of Cronus, calling upon all the gods to join his cause, it was Styx who arrived first, bringing with her victory, strength, force, and rivalry, each of them personifying the very essence of conquest and dominion. In return for this early and unwavering support, Zeus gave Styx and her river a unique role in the cosmic order, decreeing that all oaths among the gods be sworn upon her name. From that moment, the black stream of Styx became the unbreakable seal of divine truth, and any god who dared to swear falsely upon its waters would face a punishment more feared than mortal death: exile from Olympus, the loss of voice and breath for years, and the shunning of their divine kin. The ceremony was solemn and symbolic, performed with water drawn in golden basins, as libations before the great wars, including not only the Titanomachy, but also the later battle against the giants, when Zeus once again turned to the power of Styx to seal his intentions. In these sacred moments, the water of her river did not merely symbolize truth, it enforced it, and to speak falsely in its name was to bring down the wrath of the heavens themselves. In one account, when Cronus was overthrown and sought to rally the Titans to reclaim his lost kingdom, a monstrous creature, born from Earth herself, emerged, a bull whose back was the body of a serpent, a creature of such terror that its very innards were said to possess the power to overthrow the gods. But Styx, warned by the fates of the danger it posed, acted before it could be used. She imprisoned it in a shadowed grove hidden behind triple walls, a place cloaked in darkness and guarded by divine law. Yet the threat was not easily extinguished. One of the Titans' allies, the 100-handed Briareus, managed to slay the beast with an unbreakable blade of adamant, intent on casting its insides into fire to fulfill the ancient prophecy. But before he could complete this act, Zeus intervened. Commanding the birds of the sky, he sent a kite to snatch the fatal remains and bring them safely to him, foiling the Titans' last desperate attempt to tip the war in their favor. In this moment, the protective act of Styx once again ensured the stability of Olympus, proving that her allegiance was more than a gesture. It was a pillar on which the new order stood. Yet before these great wars and cosmic uprisings, Styx had once been a carefree nymph among the many daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, known as the Oceanids. Her early days were spent in the blooming meadows of the mortal world, bathed in sunlight and surrounded by wildflowers. In one ancient hymn, she is counted among the nymphs who played alongside Persephone on the fateful day of her abduction. They gathered hyacinths, irises, crocuses, and lilies, their laughter filling the air, their hands filled with blossoms, unaware of the shadows rising beneath the earth. along with other young goddesses like Calypso, Electra, and Urania. Styx roamed the field of eternal spring, a child of water and sky, before the chasm of Hades opened and claimed Persephone, though that day would mark a turning point for the daughter of Demeter. For Styx, it would foreshadow her own descent into a deeper realm, one not of joy and fragrance, but of solemnity and sacred terror. Unlike many of her sisters who remained connected to rivers, fountains, or clouds, Styx became bound to the underworld forever. In Hesiod's account, she took up her residence in a palace unlike any other, a dread sanctuary loathed even by the other gods. Nestled in the heart of Hades, her home was built with towering cliffs and fortified with shining silver columns that held up the very ceiling of the world. It was said to rise so high that it pressed against the heavens, a chilling reminder of her place not among the joyful gods of Olympus, but in the depths where silence and judgment ruled. The palace of Styx was no place of welcome or light. It was a fortress of truth, where deception could not pass and lies turned to dust. It was there that Iris, the rainbow messenger, would sometimes arrive, sent by Zeus when the gods quarreled, to carry messages or gather the river's water when the truth was in doubt. But even Iris came rarely, for the road to Styx was steeped in shadows and dread, and her presence, though honored, was a reminder of grim necessity. Styx, the eldest daughter of Oceanus, was set apart from the start. She was not like her sisters, who drifted among flowers or danced in the foam of waves. She was a force both feared and revered, the guardian of divine justice, the first to answer the call of Olympus, the mother of the powers that made Zeus unchallengeable. Her essence was hatred, not in the form of petty cruelty, but in the divine sense of moral fury, the kind that punishes betrayal, guards sacred vows, and holds even immortals to account. That she was chosen to become the oath of the gods speaks to the trust placed in her constancy and the dread her name invoked. Her river was more than water. It was judgment. Her presence in myth was more than a tale. It was the foundation of order, a silent reminder that all power, even divine, must rest upon truth. Her story is not one of warmth or beauty, but one of strength, clarity, and sacrifice. For she gave up the joy of Olympus to guard its integrity from the shadows below. Iris, the swift-footed messenger of the gods, was often dispatched across the sky not only to deliver commands from Olympus, but also to carry out the gravest task known among immortals, to fetch the sacred water of the Styx. This water, dark and cold, flowing with a terrible solemnity from the jagged cliffs of the underworld, was the substance upon which the gods swore their most binding oaths. Not just a symbolic act, but a sacred rite that bound their eternal existence to the truth of their words. These were not mere declarations, but promises made before the cosmos, sealed with a liquid so ancient and powerful that even the gods feared to call upon it lightly. The Styx was no ordinary stream. It was primeval, older than Olympus, a 10th branch of the great Oceanus, veering away from the other 9 silver swirling loops that encircled the world and the seas. Unlike those waters that mingled with salt oceans, this one plunged deep into the blackness beneath the earth, slipping through shadows, jagged cliffs, and unseen valleys, coursing its way through a terrain that echoed with the silence of judgment. Its stream was so feared that even the great hero of Olympus, the son of thunder, could not escape its grasp unscathed, and Athena herself once declared that even he would not have survived the steep dripping falls of the Stygian path had fate not guarded him. This sacred stream was not only a physical river, but a force that played a role in judgment and divine accountability. when the immortals quarrelled, when truth was at stake, Zeus would command Iris to descend into the dark, winding places of the world, to fill a golden basin with the freezing waters of the Styx, and return it to the shining court of Olympus. Whoever drank or poured this water while swearing an oath placed their fate in the hands of the river itself. If any dared to lie, the consequence was exile and silence, a period of 9 years in which they would be neither heard nor seen among the gods, cut off from nectar, ambrosia, and the halls of council. The Styx did not judge with passion or revenge. It judged with the impersonal force of necessity, unmoved by tears or status. But the river's reach extended far beyond the upper world. In the gloomy depths of the underworld, where the souls of the dead assembled and where guilt and vengeance hung like a thick mist, the River Styx flowed with dark purpose. There, in the heart of the fortress of Hades, the lord of the underworld sat on his black throne, surrounded by those who carried out the eternal work of justice. The Furies, born of blood and night, stood nearby, ever watchful and ready to strike at those who had escaped punishment in life. Alongside them were the countless personifications of death, each representing a different kind of ending: violent, sudden, slow, or cruel. Vengeance herself, shackled in chains that clinked with fury, waited to be unleashed. Even the Fates, those 3 sisters who measured and cut the threads of every mortal soul, stood there in solemn judgment, signaling with a single gesture whether a soul was to be condemned or spared. The work was endless and heavy, and even the underworld judges, Minos and Rhadamanthes, at times urged mercy, counseling their darker brother not to forget all pity. But amidst all this, the Styx remained the most terrible of witnesses, for it was said that even the gods could be brought to judgment by its waters. In rare and whispered accounts, the Styx accused the immortals themselves of perjury, bearing silent witness to the lies spoken in arrogance or deceit, and its voice echoed through the stone halls of Hades like a funeral bell. The water itself was strange and unique. In Hesiod's description, it drizzled down from a cliff that reached toward the heavens, its path steep and trembling, pouring into the hidden places of the earth. Its journey took it through remote and lifeless land, through shadows that had never seen light, before it joined the network of infernal rivers: Acheron, the river of sorrow; Cocytus, the river of wailing; Phlegethon, the stream of fire, all of which mingled at the boundary of Hades' realm. According to ancient poets and philosophers alike, these rivers defined the landscape of death. Plato wrote of them as vast meandering forces that shaped the geography of the afterlife, with Oceanus flowing around the world, and Acheron winding through the deserts of death, while the Styx, among them all, carried with it the weight of unbreakable truth. Even in the myths of heroes, the Styx played a formidable role. When a mortal ventured into the underworld, whether seeking prophecy, redemption, or reunion, they would inevitably come near the Styx. Odysseus, guided by the sorceress of the Isle, was told to beach his ship near the deep eddying Oceanus and walk into the realm of Hades, where the streams joined. There, among the wails of spirits and the fire-lit waters of Phlegethon, the Styx revealed itself as part of the dark foundation of the world, always flowing, always judging. Its branch joined the sorrowful Acheron and the fiery streams in one unholy convergence, marking the boundary no soul could cross twice. And in a scene heavy with dread, the blind prophet of Thebes once called upon the river in his curse. The ancient seer, driven by fury against his sons, raised his voice to the gods below and to the Styx itself, whose presence he claimed to see in its shadowed depths. His curse, soaked in despair and pain, was not made lightly, for invoking the Styx was to call upon the ultimate authority of vengeance and fate. He appealed not to the gods of light and justice, but to the ones who ruled the dead, and to the river that could not be deceived. Thus, the River Styx was never just water. It was hatred, truth, justice, and fear. It was a barrier between life and death, between lies and law. It was a witness to the most ancient promises and the judge of the boldest liars. It curled beneath the surface of the world, unseen yet ever present, shaping destinies with its silence. Through myths, epics, and prayers, the Styx stood not as a backdrop, but as a force, an eternal stream that even the immortals had to respect. It demanded honesty, punished betrayal, and bound the divine order with a current darker and colder than any other, jetting down through the jagged lands where no light ever touched, and where every oath spoken echoed forever, passing beneath the earth, hidden from the light of the mortal world. The ancient rivers of the underworld wind their way through shadowed realms untouched by time, weaving an eternal web of judgment, silence, and dread. Among these rivers, 4 stood as the primary forces shaping the landscape of the afterlife, each flowing with its own character, color, and consequence. These rivers converged and diverged in a pattern that only the gods fully understood. The third among them, Periphlagathon, was a stream of blazing fire, gushing between the others with unbearable heat, its current glowing red and alive with the essence of punishment. Opposite this fiery stream issued the 4th river, a dark and dreadful current that poured first into a wild and desolate place. This place was so saturated with gloom that the very earth seemed to shimmer with a dull, eerie blue, like lapis lazuli, deep and mesmerizing, but filled with dread. Into this haunted place flowed the river known as the Stygios, and from it formed the lake called the Styx. The lake was still, black, and terrible, and its surface reflected no light. Here, in the heart of the underworld, the river took on its most fearsome form, absorbing into its waters powers so dreadful that even immortals dared not invoke them lightly. Once imbued with this dark strength, the Styx continued its journey, slipping beneath the earth once more, and circling around in the opposite direction to the burning Periphlagathon, until, at last, it came to meet its twin in purpose, though not in nature, at the Arcarusian lake. This meeting of the Styx and Periphlagathon near Acheron, the river of sorrow, formed one of the many symbolic and actual boundaries between the worlds of the living and the dead. Another stream, Cocytus, often described as the river of wailing, flowed alongside and through this grim terrain. Cocytus, fed by tears and misery, mingled with no other water, maintaining its own purity of grief. As it wound its way through the deep places, it eventually found its way, like the Styx, into the dreadful Gulf of Tartarus, the lowest region of the underworld, where the most wicked souls were punished eternally. The Styx and Cocytus circled the depths, bearing witness to the fate of those who had broken divine law or defied justice. These rivers, though terrible, formed the very bones of the underworld, each one acting as a vessel for truth, consequence, and order. In ancient philosophy and education, these rivers held more than just mythological significance. They shaped how the Greeks thought about courage, morality, and the soul. Plato warned that such terrifying imagery, especially that of Cocytus, the loathed Styx, and the charnel grounds of the damned, should not be used to frighten the young, for it instilled in them a deep and unnatural fear of death. If one was to become brave, he argued, one must not be haunted by visions of horror, for bravery could not coexist with dread. Yet such was the weight of these names. Their mere mention in poetry and song sent shudders down the spines of all who heard. The power of the Styx, especially, lay not only in what it was, but in what it represented. A river of deadly hate, a flood of eternal consequence, and the final boundary across which all must eventually pass. Throughout the ages, even outside the realm of direct mythology, the Styx appeared in stories of sorcery and destruction. In older times, on the island of Rhodes, it was said that the Telchines, a race of ancient beings known for their malice and magical craft, used water drawn from the Styx, mixed with sulfur, to poison plants and animals. Their manipulation of the river's deadly power linked them forever to dark arts and curses, suggesting that even a drop of the Styx's flow could bring death and ruin when wielded with intention. The waters were not merely symbolic, they were believed to carry a physical and spiritual potency that corroded, withered, and destroyed anything pure or living. The river's terrifying nature was further underscored in the great myths of heroes, where even the most powerful were tested by its presence. When the son of thunder was sent to fetch the monstrous hound from the gates of Hades, he had to cross the steep, mist-shrouded waters of the Styx. It was said that he never should have escaped its deadly streams had he not been protected by divine will, for the river was a trap for souls, pulling down with its current anything that dared challenge its course. Those who passed through it were changed, some irrevocably, for it did not simply flow through the underworld. It bound it, sealed it, and guarded its secrets. In other tales, spirits associated with torment and madness were drawn to its banks. Mania, the goddess of insanity, made her way to the rocky edges of the Styx, where the winged furies lived. These furies, spirits of vengeance, drew their strength from the river's proximity, and their torments were sharper and more dreadful for it. The Styx was not merely a location, it was an atmosphere, a presence that fueled divine retribution and madness alike. Even the stories of love and vanity ended at its banks. In a haunting tale, a young man who had fallen in love with his own reflection wasted away, and when his soul descended into the afterlife, it was said he continued to gaze upon himself in the pool formed by the Styx. His punishment was not flames or chains, but an eternal obsession that kept him bound to the water's surface, staring at a reflection that could never love him back. A reflection shaped now by the river of hate. The path to the Styx itself was marked by death and silence. One poet wrote of a trail that descended into twilight, lined with yew trees and choked by the hush of unspoken things. This path, narrow and steep, led downward toward the infernal realm, where the rivers waited to receive all souls, guilty and innocent, remembered and forgotten. Once crossed, there was no return. The Styx did not simply separate life and death. It sanctified that divide, ensuring that none could pass back without the will of the gods. In every ancient tale, every hymn and epic, the Styx appeared as a boundary and a judge. Its waters were cold, dark, and eternal, running through jagged land and dreadful lakes, circling the underworld like a coiled serpent. It absorbed hatred, vengeance, madness, and death, and in return, gave the cosmos the certainty that some lines could not be crossed without cost. The river of the underworld was not just feared, it was sacred. It was the keeper of divine law and the final witness to every broken promise and every soul's fate. It flowed still, unseen by mortal eyes, but ever present beneath the world. Where sluggish Styx exhales her misty vapors, the very air thickens with an ancient heaviness, and it is along this shrouded path that the newly departed, the rightly buried dead, begin their silent descent into the realm of shadows. The ghostly forms, known as shades, drift toward the banks of that dark river in steady, mournful procession, drawn to the underworld by an invisible law that no soul can resist. The Styx does not rush like mountain streams or flow with the elegance of ocean tides. Instead, it creeps, it coils, exhaling a breath not of life, but of death's slow certainty. Its waters are black and motionless, veiled in mist, a mirror of the sorrow and stillness that rules this domain. To cross it is to pass beyond the grasp of the sun, beyond time and memory. Yet, for all its silence, the Styx is a barrier of divine power, one that even immortals cannot cross without fear. When the bard of legend once ventured into this land to retrieve the soul of the one he loved, he begged in anguish to cross the river again, to return and claim her once more. But his pleas were met with refusal. The ferryman, aged and grim, barred his way. Denied passage, the bard did not leave. Instead, he lingered there for 7 days, unmoving upon the river's bank, sustained by grief and despair alone. His tears fell into the unyielding waters, his cries unanswered in the darkness. He sat in the presence of the Styx, not as a traveller, but as a mourner, bound by sorrow and the river's unbreakable rule that none may cross it twice for love. The waters of the Styx were not just feared for their spiritual power. They were dark in the truest, most dreadful sense. Poets called them blacker than night, as if no light could reflect upon them, as if they consumed brightness itself. They were described as black waves, heavy and thick, churning without motion, a mirror of the grief that surrounds them. Some declared once was enough to gaze upon that joyless domain. To see the river even once was to feel a coldness that never left. But the Styx was not a place that forgot, nor a river that forgave. It did not flow for mercy or for change. It circled the underworld in 9 heavy rings, coiling like a serpent of hate, its motion eternal and enclosing, forming a prison not of iron or stone, but of water and silence. Even the gods, those who lived in high Olympus and dined on nectar and ambrosia, feared to speak a false oath upon its name, for the Styx was the boundary between lie and punishment, and to forswear it was to face exile from the divine realm. When one hero travelled into the depths of the underworld, led by a seer to confront his fate and glimpse the souls of the dead, he stood before the marshes of Cocytus and the still black waters of the Styx. The seer explained that none could cross unless they had been properly buried, for the river rejected those whose bones had not been laid to rest in sacred rites. And so, on its near bank, a crowd of shades wandered restlessly, unable to pass, their eyes pleading, their voices silent, trapped by the very law of death. The ferryman, grim and silent, guided only those who met the old customs, pushing his barge from one shore to the other with no joy, no rest, and no delay. On the far bank, the waters widened, forming a vast and unlovely fen, thick with gloom, encircling the land of the dead, forming a ringed prison that bound the lost in an endless circle of silence. It was within these rings, these dark and heavy circuits, that the souls were trapped, not only by fate, but by the unyielding design of the river that would not let them leave. The lowest parts of the underworld were ruled by shadows and whispers, where the shades of the dead moved without weight, without breath, called from their graves to stand again in darkness. The ooze there was black and slick, and the reeds that grew from it were dry and sharp, whispering in the still air. The marshes of Cocytus joined the Styx here, and together they formed the wide and sluggish swamp that even immortals feared to disturb. From the center of this watery maze rose the palace of the underworld, ringed on all sides by the rivers of judgment. The hall of the dead king stood silent and stern, a place wrapped in mist and guarded by double moats. One fiery and wild, the other slow and black. Here even the gates breathe sorrow. Once a mortal stronger than most dared to force his way into this realm, breaking through its doors and dragging its guardian beast into the light. He dared to disturb the order, to challenge death itself. There were those who said that he could not stop his conquest, that Earth was too small for him, and now he would claim the Styx, lay it bare, and stand over the conquered darkness. Yet even he, mighty though he was, could not tame the river's essence. It was not something that could be grasped or ruled, for it was not just water, it was law, it was fate, and it was older than him. There was a place deep within Tartarus where the darkness thickened, and the mists hung like curtains that blocked out memory. From that place flowed two rivers from a single source. One, the Styx, moved slow and silent, carrying no sound but holding the weight of divine truth. The other, Charon, rushed and roared, crashing over rocks, swift and wild, unable to be crossed again once passed. Their opposite natures reflected the balance of the underworld, silence and fury, oath and chaos. Together they formed a ring around the hall of the dead, an eternal moat of judgment. Above them, in a place where the waters thickened and slowed into a numbed pool, a rock hung low, touching the waves. The place was guarded by an old man, clothed in filth, whose task it was to ferry the trembling souls across. He was a figure of horror, not for what he did, but for what he represented, the end of all choices. Here also moved a monstrous memory from the world above, the many-headed beast once slain, its heads now reborn in shade. It plunged into the Styx's fens, its ghostly heads writhing, seeking vengeance in the murk. Even it was bound by the swamp, trapped in the slow waters of the Stygian land. From time to time, spirits of darker power, drawn to death, were called here. The goddess of madness, for example, found her way to the edges of the river, seeking the winged spirits who punished hubris. And others came as well, not to cross, but to stare, to remember, or to mourn. To see the Styx even once was to carry it forever, for it was not just a river, but a force that held memory, truth, and the final seal of all things. It was the last border, and it remembered every soul that dared to cross. Brandished in trembling hands, the gloomy branch from the Stygian stream, a branch cut from the yew that drank from the river of death, became a symbol of passage, of the grim permission needed to tread the path between life and the realm below. The Styx, ever flowing with its dark and bitter waters, was not merely a river, but a force of cosmic authority. When the natural order broke, and pestilence descended upon the land, the signs of the underworld spread above ground. The bars of Erebus burst open, unleashing the sisters of vengeance, armed with torches kindled in Tartarus itself, their flames not of light, but of fever and judgment. In that moment, the river Phlegethon, the fiery stream of punishment, abandoned its usual course and mingled with the Styx, corrupting once pure waters with its heat and malice. The rivers of the upper world, touched by this infernal union, brought sickness instead of nourishment, death instead of life, as the gates of the underworld cracked open. From these tainted streams rose the jaws of death, gaping and greedy, wide enough to swallow an entire city, as mortal breath gave way to the mist of the Styx. So powerful was the river's pull that even love could not resist its gravity. In grief-stricken madness, a soul declared it would follow its lost beloved through every pool and flame, through the torments of Tartarus, through Acheron's suffocating depth, and even through the still waters of the Styx. This vow echoed in a realm where logic broke down and only emotion remained, where to love was to be willing to drown in the darkness and never rise again. The Styx circled the underworld in 9 coils, a vast serpentine ring whose every loop closed tighter upon the souls it encased, where one side burned with the fire of Phlegethon, the other froze with the silence of Styx. When the messenger of the gods descended into the depths, his path ran between these 2 rivers, framed by flame and shadow, a corridor of dread where each step echoed against the silence of the dead. Even in the mortal world, places existed where the Styx was believed to rise, such as in Arcadian Phenios, a quiet town that legends claim sent down the river's waters straight to the throne of the underworld. There, the connection between life and death was closer, and each spring or stream might carry with it the echoes of finality. Sometimes, when the realms of the dead trembled, the veil lifted and the hidden region became visible. In such moments, the groves of the afterlife opened, revealing black rivers churning with ancient grief. Acheron, thick with mud and the scent of decay, bubbled up. Phlegethon rolled its smoky currents, not with brightness, but with murky flame. And there, in between them, Styx flowed cold and dark, not with speed, but with weight, setting a solemn line between the wandering ghosts and the gates they could not yet pass. The river divided not only the dead from the living, but also the remembered from the forgotten. When a divine mother once sought to make her son immortal, she brought him to the heart of Tartarus and dipped his body into the waters of Styx. The ritual, carried out in secret, sealed his flesh with the river's power, making it invulnerable to weapons and wounds. His limbs became unbreakable, like forged bronze wrapped in divine truth. Later stories tell how she tried to immerse him again, to reinforce what had already been done, and some even say that she carried him across those waters hidden from the eyes of death itself. No other mortal received this gift, for to bathe in Styx was not a blessing. It was a pact, a tethering of the soul to the most sacred river of the underworld. To touch those waters and survive was to be forever bound to something older and colder than fate. But not all contact with the river was so rarefied. In acts of divine vengeance, the spirits of punishment drew water from Styx to sanctify their wrath. One tale tells of how the river's black drops were sprinkled into mortal chambers like a prophecy, a warning that sorrow and groaning would soon fill the house. To curse someone with the Styx was to mark them for suffering beyond remedy, a pain rooted not in wounds but in the soul. The river's essence was invoked in rituals and curses alike, its name spoken in shadows, always with caution, for to call upon Styx was to summon judgment itself. By the time of the Latin poets, the name Styx had become interchangeable with death and the underworld itself. Writers no longer distinguished between the river and the realm it encircled. To say Stygian was to mean anything infernal. Dark groves, misty gates, the palace of shadows, and the ghosts that roamed its halls. For the ancients, Styx was no longer just a stream. It was the threshold to all that lay beyond breath. To escape Styx was to cheat death. To fall into it was to embrace the inevitable. Even the queen of the gods, in her fury against the hero who descended into her husband's domain, mocked the notion that anyone could defy the river's pull. She reminded him that Styx was not only a place but a law, and none could bypass its sentence. Some prayed that those they loved would reach the haven of the Styx safely, that their souls would find peace beyond the water. Others cursed that same river, crying out against its cruelty, for its stillness never replied. And there were those who returned again and again in thought or dream to its banks, standing before the Styx, not as conquerors, but as mourners, as those who wished to undo what had been done. So the Styx flowed, always hidden, always present, from curses to prayers, from rites of vengeance to blessings of protection. Its waters shaped the myths and fears of mortals and gods alike. It did not need to roar or flood. Its silence was enough. It was the stream that held oaths and pain, strength and sorrow, memory and oblivion. It ran beneath the world, beneath dreams, beneath time itself. To touch it was to know the edge of eternity. To see it was to know that some things, once crossed, cannot be returned from. The Styx held all these things, coiled in its dark current, circling forever, untouched and unchanging. Never to return. Those were the silent words carved in the air as one crossed the threshold into the realm of the dead, the land ruled by the shadows of the Styx. For the ancients, the name of that river did not just evoke a place, but an end, an absolute, unchanging finality. When a soul passed over into that world, it was not merely departing from the realm of the living, it was surrendering to a law deeper than death itself, a law written in mist and bound in the waters of the infernal Styx. It was through these waters and this realm that necromancers, prophets and seers summoned the past into the present. In a time of need, when truth lay hidden beneath centuries of dust, rites were performed to open the earth and call upon the inhabitants of the dark stream. The command was not given lightly, for to summon the people of the Styx was to disturb what should remain undisturbed. The seer stood over the trembling soil and cried out to the dark god of the underworld, imploring that the souls beneath be unsealed and drawn forth. The people nearby were called to raise their voices in hymn, not of joy, but of solemnity, while the barriers of the abysmal Styx were pried open, and the world of the living met the world of the dead face to face. To be held by the Styx meant more than death. It meant vanishing into the Lethean depths where memory itself dissolved. Those taken by the Styx were not merely gone. They were trapped in a silence so complete that even their names echoed no longer. When the great hero vanished from the world, stories spread that he was held in such depths, shackled beneath the dark waters, denied even the chance to dream of return. His fate, like countless others, was sealed by the ruler of the realm and the stream that obeyed no mortal plea. The river had no current that flowed back, no eddy that brought a soul upstream, no ripple that could be followed home. The Styx held its captives with no compassion, and those stories told of some few who managed to rise again into the world of sky and stars, they did so only by miracle or divine exception. Even so, in rare tales, escape did occur. Once it was told, that very same hero did return and looked once more upon the sky, rising from the pools of Stygia. But his was not a story of triumph. It was one of debt. He bore with him the marks of what he had seen, and no return from the Styx was without its price. Elsewhere, the river's gates opened not for salvation, but for ruin. In a vision of destruction, the caves and bars of deep Stygia broke apart, and the dead walked again, called up from the pits, not by hope, but by vengeance. The enemy buried long ago rose with silent faces, their shadows forming the advance of a new terror. These were not the dead seeking justice. They were the forgotten, the ones whose names had faded, pulled from the lowest depths of the underworld by some great curse or ancient summoning. The one who called to them, crying into the cracked earth, begged the realm of the Styx to receive and hide her terrible words. She wished for the river to swallow her command and keep it safe in its unyielding depths, far from the ears of gods and men. While the River Styx loomed largely in the stories of the afterlife, it was not only a mythical current buried in legend. In Arcadia, a rugged land tucked among the mountains of Greece, there existed a stream said to be the very Styx itself. Hesiod, in ancient verse, described a chilling stream that trickled from a steep cliff high above, descending in a drizzle so cold and so solemn it seemed to carry the weight of the underworld in every drop. This was believed to be one of the 10 branches of the cosmic river Oceanus, though unlike the other 9 that looped around the world and tumbled into salt water, this one carved its path beneath the earth, jetting down through jagged, dark terrain. The gods, it was said, found even this natural stream vexing, for its presence was tied to oath and truth. The very geography of Arcadia was shaped by this sacred spring, and the people who lived nearby spoke of it with hushed awe. The historian Herodotus, writing centuries later, told of how even mortal politics once bowed to the power of this stream. A Spartan leader, fearing betrayal and determined to bind his allies in loyalty, led them to the city of Nonacris, near the pool where the Arcadian Styx fell from stone into still water. There, surrounded by a wall of natural stone, the leaders of Arcadia swore their oaths, not by any temple, but by the water of the Styx. That small stream dripping quietly into a shaded pool was treated with more reverence than any altar. For to swear by the Styx was to stake one's life, one's soul, and one's place in the world beyond. The people believed that the river would not only punish perjury in life, but would drag the full soul into suffering for eternity. Nearby lay Phenios, a city closely tied to this sacred geography, a place where the divine met the physical world with an edge both sharp and absolute. Later geographers like Strabo confirmed the existence of the Styx in Arcadia, placing it clearly in relation to the land around Phenios. It was no roaring torrent, but a modest stream, one easily overlooked by the unknowing traveller. But those who understood its power knew better than to step too close or speak too casually of its name. Some said that birds flying over the pool fell dead into its depths, that its waters could dissolve metal or stone, and that even drawing near to its trickle caused faintness and despair. Whether these tales were literal or merely layered with symbolism, they reflected the ancient belief that the river, whether in the realm of myth or hidden in the Arcadian hills, was the most sacred and deadly of all natural forces. Its water was the final witness, the last refuge of truth, the substance upon which even gods placed their fate. The Styx was more than a myth. It was a river of meaning, a boundary of silence, a current of judgment. Whether flowing through the mists of the underworld or drizzling down the cliffs of Arcadia, it carried with it the echoes of every oath, every death, and every story of return or defeat. It circled the world not only in 9 loops of water, but in the memory of a people who knew that some rivers do not forgive, and some paths, once taken, can never be retraced. The Styx did not rush or sing, it waited. It waited for the next name to pass beneath its waters, the next soul to vanish from the light, the next oath to be sworn with trembling lips. And it would hold them all, forever. It is called a small stream of deadly water, but to those who knew its secrets and feared its power, it was far more than that. It was the Styx, the sacred and terrible river that belonged both to myth and to the raw physical world of Arcadia. This was not the imagined water that circled the underworld in 9 ghostly loops, but the real visible cascade that fell from the high cliffs of Nonacris, a remote and rocky region west of Phenius. Travelers who passed into this rough land and followed the right-hand path from the ruins of Nonacris found themselves standing beneath a cliff so tall and sheer that his jagged face seemed to touch the clouds. From the top of that cliff, a cold and narrow stream fell without pause, cutting through air and rock, splashing first upon a massive stone shelf, before seeping down through the rock itself into the river Krathis below. This falling water, glistening in the sun yet dreaded by all, was known to the Greeks as the Styx, a name immortalized in poetry and fear, and honored not for beauty, but for its destructive sacred mystery. Homer had once given this name to the river that ran through the underworld, the same river by which God swore unbreakable oaths, and the same river that no mortal could cross twice. When the goddess of the heavens made her vow, she did not call upon Olympus or the thunder, but upon the earth and the falling waters of the Styx, as if no force was more binding than this stream. And when a hero of old descended into Hades to fetch the Hound of Shadows, the poem said he should never have escaped the steep flows of the Stygian river. This was the reputation that surrounded the Styx, not only as a mythic boundary between life and death, but as a very real, lethal stream high in the Arcadian mountains. The people there believed this water did not simply represent danger. It was danger, physical and immediate. They said the first to die were goats, foolishly drinking from the cold, beautiful fall, only to fall lifeless where they stood. Word spread, and the people began to test its strange powers, uncovering that what it touched, it ruined. The Styx was not like other waters. It did not simply kill those who drank it, it destroyed matter itself. Vessels made of stone, of agate, of glass, and crystal crumbled beneath it. Metal fared no better. Iron, bronze, tin, even silver, all were corroded and eaten away by the water's invisible teeth. Even gold, alloyed and pure, offered no resistance when the Styx passed over it. Pottery cracked, bone decayed, horn withered. The only known substance in the world that could hold the water of the Styx without breaking apart was the hoof of a horse. Hollowed and shaped into a vessel, a horse's hoof alone could resist the corrosive nature of the sacred water and serve as a container for those bold or foolish enough to gather it. So feared was its power, and so revered was its uniqueness, that travelers carried stories of its strength far beyond Arcadia. Among those tales was one that told of a small but sturdy horn, not from a vessel made by human hands, but from a Scythian animal, an ass born with horns, rare and strong. This horn, said to have held the water of the Styx without harm, was brought as a gift to a great king. It was delivered to the Macedonian ruler, a man known across the world for his conquests and his appetite for the wonders of all lands. Whether in awe or in triumph, the king took that horn and offered it not to his own treasury, but to the god of Delphi, the healer Paeon, as a votive gift. Beneath it, he had carved an inscription, that this was no ordinary relic, but a horn which had stood against the sacred waters of the Lucian Styx, unbroken and unbeaten. And in that inscription, one could read both reverence and warning, for there was more whispered in corners than written in stone. There were those who claimed that the very same deadly water had been used in the death of the king himself. It was said, though never proven, that his drink had been tainted with the water of the Styx, and that no cure, no healing, no herb could protect him once the river's poison flowed within. Though others named different causes, the rumor clung to the story like mist to mountain stone, that not an army, not an assassin's blade, but the sacred stream of Arcadia had ended a conqueror's life. The ancient historian, walking the crags of Arcadia centuries later, still wrote of the stream with caution. He described how it fell from such a height that the eye could barely follow it, how it vanished into stone and emerged only to mingle with the krathis, and how its danger remained unchanged through time. For all its silence, the water's reputation was deafening. No traveller touched it. No animal approached it twice. Some came merely to see it, to know that such a force still flowed in the world, and they left in quiet awe, bearing tales of a river that was not myth but matter, real, sharp, cold, and fatal. The Styx, in this form, did not roar or rush. It drizzled like a whisper from the underworld, soft and deadly, and its presence turned the mountains around it into sacred ground. It was a river unlike any other, a place where myth and geography met, where poetry became reality, and where danger wore the face of holiness. The water of the Styx, whether invoked by gods, feared by mortals, or hidden in the folds of Arcadia, was a stream of endings. It resisted containment, it dissolved certainty, and yet it endured. High upon the cliffs, it still falls, ancient and unchanged, a narrow line between the sacred and the fatal, between what is spoken and what is never said again. And whether in urn, hoof, or horn, those who dared to gather it did so with reverence, for they knew the truth whispered in every drop, that the river of the underworld could touch the world of the living, and that nothing it touched would remain the same. Of its water, it was said no mortal could drink and live, for it was the River Styx, black, bitter, and sacred, hidden among the cliffs of Arcadia, where even gods hesitated to tread. It was Demeter, grieving and full of fury, who caused this spring to appear near Phineus. In her despair over the loss of her daughter, she wandered the lands of Arcadia in the guise of a mare, trying to escape not just sorrow, but also the god who pursued her with unwanted desire. When she reached the towering cliffs near Nonocris, she stopped at a spring, only to find the waters foul, corrupted by her pain and defiled by her rage. It was said she detested this water so much that she cursed it, making it black and untouchable. That moment of divine rejection, filled with sorrow and divine anger, stained the stream forever, and thus the river became associated not only with death and oaths, but also with divine grief, sorrow so deep that it could poison the very ground. But the river's story did not end there. Generations later, the water of the Styx would be wielded not only by the gods, but by mortals who came to understand its power. One such man was a warrior, a descendant of a hero, born with a strange mark, a small horn protruding from the right side of his face. He was the son of strength and carried his legacy into battle, until he was slain in single combat by a rival from Sicyon. That victor, instead of discarding the horn, kept it and filled it with the water of the Styx. It was not an offering, but a declaration. By claiming the horn and the sacred water, he claimed power over the land, and from that act, he took the throne. It was not a war of armies, but a war of symbols, an act of conquest sealed not by blood alone, but by the river of fate. The Styx, dark and coiled, thus became part of the very act of kingship, its name etched not only in myth, but in the succession of rulers. To the mortals of the ancient world, stories of the Styx were not just recited, they were believed. For some, the river was a force to be used, feared, and even touched if one dared. In the old Roman tale of the goddess who tested a mortal soul, the deadly nature of the Styx was revealed again. The goddess, in her anger and cruelty, sent a young woman on an impossible task, to climb a high mountain, where at its peak, a spring poured forth icy water, which fell from jagged cliffs into the marshes below, feeding both the Styx and the Cocytus. The woman, holding a small crystal jug, was told to fetch water from the very top, from the source itself, where the flow emerged from the rock. But this mountain was no ordinary peak. It rose sharply, its surface jagged and treacherous. The water did not flow gently. It burst forth from the mouth of a stone crevice, the force of the stream wild and angry. Along the sides of the rock, snakes coiled in hidden clefts, their heads rising, their fangs bared, their eyes fixed in unblinking, eternal guard. And it was not just the physical dangers that made this stream so impossible to reach. The water itself was alive. It whispered, it shouted, it warned. The words came from the spray, from the mist, from the very current as it spilled downward in a narrow hidden channel. "Clear off," it would say. "You won't make it," came another voice. "Watch what you're doing, and cut and run." The water mocked and tested the soul. It did not allow itself to be taken by force or stolen with cleverness. The woman stood there, unable to take another step, her body frozen not by the cold, but by the overwhelming dread that surrounded her. Her limbs grew heavy and her will melted. She was a statue in the face of divine resistance, her task broken by the mountain's cruel truth. It was not just a river, it was judgment. The spring at the summit was not a source of nourishment, but a fortress of fear, guarded not just by the serpents and the stone, but by the voice of the river itself, ancient and unrelenting. That the Styx had a voice, that it cried out against those who came near, was not surprising to those who had long feared its name. To drink its water was to die. To carry it in a vessel was to defy destruction. In Arcadia, the stream fell from the mountain above Nonacris and splashed into a basin enclosed by stone, too dangerous for animals to approach. The first to fall were goats, who, unaware of the sacred curse, drank from the pool and perished. Over time, even the bravest avoided it. Its water corroded not only flesh, but all materials: stone, crystal, bronze, and silver. The only vessel that could contain it was the hoof of a horse. And yet, despite its lethal nature, there were always those who sought it, for power, for truth, for a test of fate. It was believed that this water had even played a role in the death of the greatest conqueror the world had seen. Some whispered that he had been poisoned not by blade or wine, but by the river itself, that someone had drawn the Styx into a container, perhaps a horn like the one brought by the Scythians, and mixed it into his drink. Though none could prove it, the suspicion clung to the story that a river older than empires had ended the life of a man who had tried to rule the world seemed fitting. It was the quiet revenge of the earth against hubris, of the divine against mortal ambition. And so the Styx flowed, as it always had, through myth and mountain, through story and stream. Whether falling from the cliffs of Arcadia or whispered in the underworld, it remained a symbol of absolute power, not of strength, but of consequence. A river that dissolved truth and falsehood alike, a current that demanded reverence and punished pride. Its water was death and its path was fate. And in every story, from the goddess's rage to the crystal jug, from the horn of a dead warrior to the mountain's silent guardians, the Styx reminded the world that there were still things that could not be touched without paying the price. Her heart weighed heavy with hopelessness, and her limbs refused to move beneath the burden of a task that seemed crueler than any punishment. She had climbed the jagged cliffs where no mortal dared to tread, come face to face with the unyielding stream whose waters were forbidden even to the gods. And there, paralyzed by dread, she could not even weep. Her soul, battered and silent, had no strength left to summon tears. Yet her suffering did not go unnoticed. Providence, watching from the heights, took pity on the soul too pure and fragile to endure such torment alone. In that moment of despair, when all seemed lost, the skies stirred, and descending through the air with outstretched wings came the royal bird of the king of the gods, a symbol not only of divine favor but of unseen help. The great eagle, its feathers gilded by the sun, hovered before her, and in a voice not heard by ears but by the soul, it spoke with calm strength, recognizing the innocence that had brought her to such a place. The eagle questioned how one so inexperienced in divine matters could be expected to draw water from a stream that even immortals feared. It reminded her of what the world already knew, that the waters of the Styx were held in awe by the gods themselves. Just as mortals swore by the names of gods, the gods swore by the power of the Styx, that terrible oath stream whose name could not be spoken in vain. The Styx was not just feared, it was sacred, binding even the king of the gods to his word, for once an oath was made upon its waters, it could not be broken without dreadful consequence. With gentle firmness, the eagle took the crystal jug from her trembling hands and turned toward the spring that gushed like a wound from the stone, guarded by serpents and shadows, its very voice warning all to stay away. Flanking his body with his heavy wings, the eagle rode through the air like a boatman on a churning river, his feathers brushing close to the venomous tongues of the coiled snakes. The guardians hissed, baring fangs, their triple tongues flickering like darts. The water itself whispered threats, cried out warnings, demanded retreat. But the eagle, fearless and guided by divine favor, spoke a lie to soothe the stream's fury. He claimed to serve the goddess who had sent the mortal girl, and though false, the mention of her name stilled the chaos for just a moment. The river paused, unwilling but uncertain, and allowed the vessel to be filled. The eagle dipped the jug into the black stream and captured a measure of its cold and ancient power. With careful wings he lifted it once more, returning to the girl who had nearly given her soul to despair. She received the jug with trembling joy, her body still weak, but her hope renewed, and without delay she turned back, eager to finish what had seemed impossible only moments before. This moment was just one of many in the long history of the Styx, a river older than memory, sacred not for its beauty, but for its role in the laws of gods and men. For even in lands far from Arcadia, the waters of the Styx were known. In Thessaly, another stream called the Tartarus bore a strange and mysterious character. Flowing into the larger river Peneus, its waters floated atop the silver currents without mixing, as if they belonged to a different world. Homer had written that this stream was broken from the Styx, that its essence was of that same dark oath-bound source. It glided like oil, untouchable, a surface presence with deep roots. Some said its waters would eventually flow beneath the sea, returning to the underworld, carrying the weight of the upperworld secrets back into the depths. It was proof that the Styx was not confined to one place, that its influence reached into the very heart of the natural world. And why was this river so sacred? Why did gods tremble before its name? The answer lay deep within the myths of old, when the Titans fell and the new gods rose. In the hidden places of Hades, there was a palace where Styx herself dwelled, hated and feared even by the immortals. Born of Oceanus, she was the eldest, and she had chosen exile from Olympus to become the enforcer of divine justice. Her home was built beneath towering cliffs, its walls set with silver columns so strong they were said to hold up the sky. No god visited her lightly. Only Iris, the rainbow messenger, would be sent to her, and only in the rarest of moments, when a god had lied, or when disputes among the divine burned hot enough to call for an oath, Then and only then would Iris travel across the vast sea to bring back water from the Styx. That water, sacred and cold, would be poured as part of the oath ritual, and any god who broke their word after swearing upon it would face a punishment that even immortality could not soften. To be exiled from the company of the gods, to be denied nectar and ambrosia, to go unheard and unseen for 9 years. This was the price of falsehood sworn upon the Styx. It was not merely a punishment. It was a sentence of isolation, of oblivion. The gods, for all their power, were not above this law. That was why the Styx mattered, why it appeared again and again in myths, not just as a place, but as a symbol of consequence. It was invoked in war, in love, in judgment. The river was not loud or wide, but it was final. Even its physical presence reflected this. In Arcadia, it spilled from cliffs in a narrow, icy stream, cutting through rock, untamed and unchanging. Those who touched it died. Those who tried to collect it failed, unless they used the hoof of a horse, the only thing known to resist its burning, corroding touch. Animals fled from its scent. Its mist killed. Its memory lingered. And yet, people still sought it. Warriors, lovers, kings, and even those who claimed to serve the gods. They sought to harness it, to swear upon it, to wield it. But the river did not serve. It only watched, flowed, and remembered. So the girl returned with the water, unaware of all this history, unaware that what she carried had once marked gods, killed mortals, shaped fate. She only knew that the jug was full, and that hope had returned. She hurried back down the path, away from the serpents, away from the rocks that whispered, away from the sacred spring that had almost taken her soul. The Styx had allowed her to pass, not because it was merciful, but because fate had decided it would be so. And the river, ancient and silent, obeyed only fate. It did not comfort. It did not judge. It simply flowed, black and eternal, beneath the earth and through the myths, never changing, never ending. Homes on Olympus are filled with brightness, festivity, and the eternal laughter of the gods. But even there, high above the world of mortals, lies the fear of a force older and darker than any deity born of the stars. Styx, the river of unbreakable oaths. When one among the immortals breaks the harmony of Olympus through lies or betrayal, it is not thunder or punishment from a throne that restores order. It is the summons of Styx. In those rare and grave moments, Zeus sends his trusted messenger, Iris, the rainbow who bridges heaven and earth, to descend into the shadowed places and collect the sacred water of the river. Iris, graceful and swift, carries a golden pitcher, descending past mountains, past sea ridges, and into the deep and jagged places of the world, where light fades and silence holds its breath. There, hidden beneath the sky, Styx drizzles down from a cliff so steep, it seems to climb toward heaven in reverse, its waters falling like tears from the heights into the blackness below. The stream is only one horn of the mighty river Okeanos, which loops around the world in 9 silver coils, rushing through the ridges of sea and earth, tumbling into salt water, but Styx alone flows apart, veering downward through darkness, separate and sacred, untouched by the gentle paths of other waters. This stream, feared and revered, is said to be a 10th part of all water in the world, but it is not its volume that matters. It is its power. Greatly vexing even the gods, the Styx runs off its precipice in silence, yet its presence roars in the divine heart. When a god holds this water in hand and swears by it, the words spoken are bound not just by promise, but by cosmic law. For the gods, such an oath is not lightly taken, and to break it is to step outside divinity itself. The punishment is immediate and absolute. The one who is forsworn does not shout or weep, for voice is taken away. He does not stand in regret, for breath is stripped from him. He collapses, laid flat upon a bed prepared for silence, neither living nor dead, untouched by nectar or ambrosia, which give the gods their life and joy. There he lies, in a kind of divine coma, unmoving and unseen, his soul wrapped in the weight of sacred guilt. This punishment lasts not for days or months, but for a full year of the heavens, a great year, slow and solemn in its passing. And even after this long silence, the suffering is not yet ended. Once the breath returns and the eyes open again, the fallen god is not welcomed back with warmth. For 9 more years, he is cut off from everything that gives Olympus its meaning. He may not enter the halls of celebration, may not speak in the councils of the immortals, may not stand with the others at festivals or rites. He becomes a stranger to his kind, wandering in isolation, stripped of rank, voice, and purpose. Only in the 10th year is he allowed to return, to once again join the divine assemblies and walk among the gods as one of their own. This is the cost of falsehood, the judgment of the oath of Styx. It binds even Zeus himself, for not even the king of heaven may escape the consequences of invoking the most sacred river and then breaking that sacred trust. This oath was not a mere tradition, but a fearsome reality across all stories of gods and heroes. In the epic war that shook the heavens, when Hera plotted and deceived, she bound her promise not with words alone, but with the greatest of oaths. She took hold of the earth with one hand, the salt sea with the other, and called upon the Styx to witness her vow. The underworld stirred as the gods of the deep, those who followed Kronos into exile, listened in silence, for to call upon Gaia, Uranus and Styx together was to speak a truth so deep it reached through time itself. This same gesture was demanded by Hypnos when he hesitated to betray Zeus, for even the god of sleep feared nothing more than the wrath of the Oath River. Only if Hera swore by the Styx would he agree, for the river was more binding than any chain, more feared than any punishment. Time and again, poets return to this image of the dripping water, the downward flow, the dark course beneath the wide-wayed earth. When the goddess of harvest swore upon her daughter's return, she invoked not the sky or the grain, but the relentless water of the Styx. When the mother of the shining god of music and light gave her word, she did so by the unbreakable stream. The sacredness of Styx was not limited to one tale or age. It was a constant in the ever-shifting world of divine stories. Even the secluded nymph who guided a lost hero swore her intentions by the Styx, knowing that no greater bond existed. The river became the final word in any dispute, the highest authority in any debate. Not even the fates, who spun the lives of gods and men, stood apart from its reach, for the Styx was the very voice of consequence. It was not only its function as an oath that made Styx feared, it was its origin, its isolation, its path through jagged lands. The Styx did not flow with sunlight. It did not quench thirst or water fields. It was not a river for life. It was a river of judgment. Born from Okeanos but flowing apart from the rest, it carried the weight of solemn things. And though mortals never saw it, its name was known from the highest mountain to the furthest island. They spoke of it in whispers, taught its story to children not to inspire wonder, but to teach the gravity of truth. The water that drizzled from the cliff above the Arcadian mountains was said to be part of it, cold and pure and deadly. Even in the physical world, its essence could kill animals, corrode metals, and dissolve all but the hoof of a horse. It was a reminder that truth, when broken, destroyed not just faith, but the very structure of the world. So the Styx flowed, unseen yet ever present, through myths, through hills, through the silent halls of Olympus. It was the river that punished gods, the stream that bore the oaths of heaven, the dark voice that never forgot a lie. And though it made no sound and carried no wind, its judgment shaped the order of all things. Those who called upon it knew its cost, and those who broke it paid with more than time. They paid with isolation, silence, and the long, cold wait for forgiveness that only the 10th year could bring. Styx was not just a river. It was memory, it was law, and it was the shadow beneath the crown of every god. Hear this, Gaia, the ever-patient earth, and wide Ouranos, the great sky who stretches endlessly above, and let the sacred dripping waters of Styx bear witness, for among all the gods of Olympus, this is the strongest and most dreadful oath they can make. The gods do not swear lightly, and never without fear, for to call upon the Styx is to invoke the deepest and oldest law that even the immortals cannot ignore. The dark stream, hidden far beneath the world, winding its secret way through the underworld, holds such power that even the king of the gods himself, when swearing vengeance or making a promise, chooses no other witness. When Hermes, still young and clever in his mischief, was confronted by Apollo, it was not enough to speak in good faith. He was asked to swear by the potent water of Styx, either by a nod of his head, which held divine weight, or by invoking the dreadful current directly. That dark river, wild, cold, and never mixing with any other waters, is not just another feature of the underworld. It is a divine force that binds truth and punishes lies, feared by all who dwell on Olympus. When the great war between the gods and the giants drew near, Zeus made a sacred place of oath-swearing by the stream of black Styx, and drew its water into golden basins to make libations before battle. The air was thick with divine tension, and the immortals knew the seriousness of the vow. Even Odysseus, in his long journey and in moments of reverence, was told to make offerings to the gods of the underworld at this very place. The waters of Cocytus, dark and mournful, joined with the Styx, making the landscape both physically treacherous and spiritually loaded. The souls of the dead were near, the gates of Hades close, and the very air whispered of ancient truths. Centuries later, a different voice, that of a Roman poet, captured this fear. The mighty Zeus, whom the Romans called Jove, swore by the source of the inexorable river, for this was the only oath that the gods themselves could not undo. In another tale, when the same king of the gods made a promise, one so powerful that its breaking would shake the foundations of Olympus, he confirmed it not with words alone, but with the deepest gesture of divine will. He nodded, and that nod caused all Olympus to tremble. But the nod held no power without the oath behind it, and the oath was sworn by Styx, the river that boiled with pitch, flowing black and furious in the underworld. This river did not merely witness oaths, it was the very essence of divine promise. When Zeus stood before the council of the gods and swore to destroy humankind in a great flood, it was not enough to simply command. He swore by the river that glides below the world through the glades of Stygia. He had tried mercy, he claimed. All options were exhausted. When no cure remains, the blade must fall. His voice was calm, but the invocation of Styx told all who heard that the decision was absolute. When pleading with his wife to release Io from her torment, he once again swore upon the river, assuring her that no further grief would come. And though his words may have changed from love to strategy, the oath itself stood unbreakable. It was a pattern repeated again and again in myth, The gods, despite their power, were bound by this dark current. When Helios, the radiant sun, addressed his son Phaethon and wanted to prove his lineage, he swore upon Styx to grant a single wish. He did not hesitate until the wish was spoken, and when it was too late. For once the oath was made, it could not be withdrawn. Though Helios knew the request would end in tragedy, his oath held stronger than a father's fear. He begged his son to choose differently, but the river had already heard, and the river would not forget. The River Styx, then, was more than a setting for tales of the dead. It was not merely the boundary between the living and the deceased. It was a moral force, a law carved into the very fabric of the universe, an ancient and mysterious judge that outlasted titans and witnessed the rise of Olympians. When oaths were made, when truths were spoken in trembling moments, it was the Styx that turned words into fate. It flowed not just in the underworld, but in the hearts of gods when they feared for their honor, their power, or their trust. Even those far from Olympus understood its weight. Mortals could not call upon Styx, but they knew its name. They taught their children that when gods themselves tremble before a river, there must be something in it beyond all understanding, and that something, cold and dark, whispered across centuries, reminding even the proudest deity that promises, once given in Styx's name, chained them as surely as any mortal law. Thus Styx remained, always flowing, always waiting, the final witness to every sacred vow. So Saul, the all-seeing sun, who drives his golden chariot across the heavens, warned with knowing foresight, for the power of oaths sworn by the gods is not to be taken lightly, especially when the name of Styx is called upon. And yet, the weight of such divine vows is often lost on mortals, who cannot fully grasp the cost of invoking a river that even immortals fear. When the girl, unaware of the peril she summoned, asked for a favor from the king of gods, she did so innocently, without naming her wish outright. But he, mighty in stature and bound by honor, gave her the freedom to choose anything her heart desired. Confident, proud, and wishing to prove his love beyond all doubt, he responded with a promise that carried the gravity of the cosmos. "Choose what you will," he said, and to show that he meant it, he invoked the power of rushing Stygia, the dread river of the underworld, whose very name struck fear into every deity who dwelled on high. This was not just any promise. It was sealed by an oath that no god could break, and when the girl asked him to reveal himself in his full divine radiance, she unknowingly signed her death sentence, for he could not go back on his word. The blinding light that revealed the god's true form consumed her, and all that remained was the memory of a wish fulfilled too literally. Elsewhere, when a son of the sea, proud and fierce, was granted a rare and powerful gift by his ocean-born father, it came with the might of 3 sacred prayers that would be honored no matter the cost. And to bind this gift in stone, the god called upon Styx, invoking the river that ran through the halls of the dead, the very same river that even the immortals hesitated to name unless they were certain of their words. The oath, once taken, could not be unmade, and with it came a power few could hold without tragedy. It was believed that no soul, once it crossed the pool of Styx, could ever return, for the dead who reached that threshold passed into silence, eternal. They no longer existed in any form that the living could touch, and thus Styx was not only a witness to vows, it was the point beyond which life itself could not reach. Even Zeus, who ruled Olympus with thunder in his hand, did not speak of Styx casually. When swearing to his queen Hera, he called upon the river that belonged to his brother, the god of the underworld, as if to lend unshakable force to his words. "By those awful waters," he declared, "I swear an oath abiding and irrevocable." The gods knew that once Styx was invoked, no power, not even their own divine will, could undo what had been sworn. In their highest courts, when promises were needed to settle disputes or forge peace, the River Styx was always called upon. Its black, churning waters were more feared than any blade or curse, for they carried consequences that lasted through eternity. This deep-rooted fear was not merely poetic. In tales of old, it was said that the gods themselves often swore by Styx, just as mortals swore by the gods, creating a mirrored reflection of reverence and fear. And so the river became a symbol of unbreakable truth. Its waters were sacred, feared and untamed, believed to be so corrosive that nothing could contain them. Nothing, that is, except the unyielding resolve of divine authority. These same waters, as told in stories whispered from mountaintop temples to valley altars, played witness to both punishment and blessing. When vengeance stirred in the heart of the Queen of the Heavens, she too turned to Styx. She swore by its infernal currents that she would crush a mortal house in ruin, not with a sword or flame, but with sorrow and flood. The river bore her wrath and her oath and flowed forward, unseen but ever binding. Even in times when peace had to be forged, when war threatened to tear the heavens apart, the gods did not clasp hands or make treaties like men. They stood before Styx, called upon the ancient forces of the cosmos, Zeus, earth, sky, and that dark flood, and made their vows while the fates themselves looked on. The Moirai, who held the threads of all lives, stood witness, ensuring that the pact would be honored for all time, and that the river's memory would not fade. The union of all these elements, oath, witness, punishment, turned Styx into more than a river. It became a force of law, older than Olympus and stronger than time. Such was the awe of Styx, a river that did not flow only through shadowed canyons or deep underworld paths, but through the very hearts of gods and the threads of fate. Its name was whispered when the stakes were highest, when the truth needed an anchor, when love, vengeance, or power had to be weighed by something greater than desire. For it was Styx that held the gods accountable, the same river that could strip them of ambrosia and cast them into voiceless silence for a year if they lied upon it, followed by 9 more years of exile from divine counsel. This was the price of forswearing the river's oath, and no god, however proud or mighty, risked it lightly. Through all the myths, all the battles, and all the bargains, the River Styx remained, still and black and ancient, the final witness to every vow the gods dared make.